Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of AI Governance Watch. I'm Guru Sethupathy, the General Manager of AI Governance at Optro, and I'm happy to have with us today Richard Marcus, our very own Chief Information Security Officer. As a brief intro, Richard leads Optro's cybersecurity functions for product, infrastructure, and corporate, as well as our own internal risk and compliance initiatives. Richard, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Guru, especially during this really interesting time for cyber and AI and governance. What a time, right, to be talking about this stuff.
Well, I'm excited. That's why I'm excited to have you. And I know you and I have chatted about a bunch of topics related to security and AI governance. So I'm excited to do this with you in front of our audience. But before we get into AI, which we're obviously going to talk about, what's the one thing people maybe misunderstand about the CISO function and security teams and your roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, I think a common misconception, especially around AI, is that we're the department of no. I think a lot of the rogue AI that we're seeing, a lot of the experimentation that we're seeing around AI sort of assumes that security wouldn't be an ally or an advocate for some of that investment. And I think it just fundamentally misunderstands a lot of the posture and intention for security teams. We're using AI in a lot of our own teams' internal work, and I think it's easy for us to see, the value proposition and what it means to the business. And so we're all hands on deck, really kind of leaning into this trend and trying to help the business adopt the technology safely. But I think there's really a fundamental misunderstanding about what partnership opportunity exists if you engage security or really any risk functions, right? The risk management and audit functions included.
Yeah, I think there's a natural view that security is going to be super risk averse. And I think that's what you're alluding to. And in our conversations, I have not found you to be that way in your teams. And so it's been a really breath of fresh air. Look, what is the mindset shift, right? When you think about AI, both in terms of how you think about using it for enhancing security, but also the incredible surface area of risk from a security standpoint.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of hyperbole and metaphors around AI, and pick whichever one you want. The AI revolution, this inflection point, tipping point. I mean, it's all true. I think we can look to our history, DevOps, cloud transformation, shift left security. A lot of these inflection points in the tech industry are similar in that they require a mindset shift. The way that we do things before and after are going to look and feel completely different. And that impacts security as well. I think, as we look back to some of these other prior transformations, like DevOps and shift left in particular, I think it was hard to tell in real time, but certainly in hindsight, it's obvious that we're more secure after than we were before. Right. And so I think the AI transformation is no different. I mean, there's certainly anxiety anytime you're going to make changes. As changes as significant as we're seeing in this revolution, but we're trying to reimagine security in a way that's more integrated, more comprehensive, more successful, post transformation than before. I was really encouraged this past fall. We had Jen Easterly, the former head of the CISA, at our Audit and Beyond conference. And she said that AI will eliminate the need for security altogether. And I think, I don't know if that's true or how quickly that will happen, but we're certainly seeing signs that use of AI in our critical processes is tremendously beneficial and really disrupting a lot of really manual, toilsome work that we used to do as a team, and just allowing us to shift our focus more strategic and be better value enablers for the organizations that we serve. And so I think that's really the big picture that I would focus security leaders on, and the mindset shift that you have to make is, there's going to be some dust kicked up in the short term. We're going to have to retool and stretch and learn new skills. But I think the end result will be more secure outcomes for the organizations over time.
I hope so, for sure. I want to pull on a few threads that you talked about there. One in particular, Jen's comment, because that's a provocative statement. And so, what does that mean to you, right? Do you buy that point? And if so, what does that mean to say AI will eliminate the need for security? What do we mean by that?
Yeah, I think, in the same way that we looked at shift left as sort of moving security concepts, moving security gates closer to the people building product, AI presents a similar opportunity. So if we shift our focus and our efforts and energy to creating instructions for AI, training AI on how to build secure software, moving the detection of insecure AI or insecure design further left, and really equip and arm developers, this sort of new breed of AI powered software developers who kind of have more of an architect's mindset, giving them the tooling, giving them the trained models and the prompt guardrails that will just result in more secure product being built over time. I think we're really focusing our efforts there and seeing tremendous ROI on the time spent in that particular area. And we're seeing more secure product, more secure code being developed as a result of that. You can extrapolate that same concept into other areas of information security, certainly in the way that we manage infrastructure. And we're even seeing some of that, coming into the corporate space and certainly in the GRC space as well. So, we're stretching, we're being creative, we're trying to do everything that, any other technical team that's embracing AI or even non-technical teams that are embracing AI are doing, and just reimagining our work, taking better advantage of the technology.
Yeah. And just to put a fine point on it, when we say eliminate the need for security, it's not eliminating the need for security, but it's reimagining that,
The traditional
how that gets
function.
executed, right? And saying the traditional function may not look like it does today, with the shift left, with using AI to impose more real-time guardrails and real-time checks and real-time monitoring. Your function and that need is just going to look quite different, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. That's right. That's a much better way to put it. Yeah. I think, eliminating security is a clickbaity sort of way to describe it.
Right.
But I think, more honestly, the way that we perform the security function will look completely different.
Which is still a provocative statement, right? Like that's still a pretty big deal. Without giving away anything sensitive, right? I want to hit on both sides. How are we, you've touched on this already, but how are we starting to use AI in our security posture today? And then I want to hit the other side of that coin. We'll come to the second. What does keep you up at night? And I'm sure there's got to be. I know even if I know you're an optimist, but like there's got to be stuff that keeps you up at night. But like what? Let's start with how are we using it today without again giving away too much.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about secure software development, and so just to kind of quickly recap, we're rewriting, redesigning our SDLC. Now that developers are making more use of AI in the software development process, we're trying to figure out how do we bake in security into those layers as they're developing code, as they're developing new designs. Security is kind of right there embedded in the tools.
And so just to get precise, is that like actually like some real-time checks in the process of development, basically?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great use cases for AI in vulnerability detection, but that's not even far left, far further left enough. We certainly are using AI in vuln detection and vuln management, but we want to be able to provide security agents for developers to use in real time to evaluate the security of the designs they're proposing. So if you think about when a developer tries to decompose a design document into tasks for an AI to go write code, there should be a security agent right there evaluating those designs and notifying them what security risks and threats might exist in their design, giving them controls, recommended controls to implement, and sort of informing the architecture that they're building kind of in real time. So that's a really powerful new use case that like we never had enough human threat modelers to scale that over all of the work that the teams might be doing. But an AI agent certainly can scale over everything a developer might be building. So,
and that's the transformational power here, right? Like, is that scaling? Like when you're talking about embedding that far left at scale, it just wasn't possible. Right? Before AI, right? And so that's a reimagining work, reimagining doing things in different ways because of what this unlocks is pretty amazing. But tell me, and I love the way you walk through the details of that example. Pretty powerful, Richard. What keeps you up at night?
There are the sort of like the new class of AI vulnerabilities and the new AI risks that keep me up at night, and some of my counterparts. Risks like sensitive data leakage, misconfiguration, abuse of the technology, overconfidence in the output. Like these are all new categories of risks that we're having to kind of think through. But honestly, I think those are secondary in my mind to I think a far greater risk, which is this idea of falling behind in the AI arms race. Like we're just seeing so much evidence of the bad guys using AI to get better at what they do. And you can look at the Anthropic report from Q4 last year and just the ease at which attackers are launching these really sophisticated large scale attacks against targets in ways that they were never cost effective to be able to do prior to AI. And so, the thing that keeps me up at night is if we don't keep up in that arms race, if our teams aren't keeping up their AI fluency, and learning how to scale ourselves according to the same sort of factors, the bad guys are going to win, right? That's really I think the most concerning thing in my mind is we got to figure out ways to scale what we're doing and do better so that we can keep up.
I mean, that's probably one of the most compelling arguments I've ever heard for the use of AI, right? Because basically the threat actors are using it. There's no question about it. And they're innovating, right, in ways that if CISO teams are relying on kind of classical methods and classical technology, it's game over.
Yeah, we'll fall behind.
100%, right? They can scale the attacks. They can do new types of attacks. It changes their business model. It changes their ability to scale these threats. And I can understand why, as a CISO, you're 100% going to have to leverage AI to combat their use of AI, essentially, right? And I think that's pretty important. What from a GRC standpoint do you see in terms of how AI can transform this business?
Yeah. So from a GRC standpoint, and I think about security operations in a similar way, there's still so much manual work that we do, so toilsome work that we do that can be so much better done, more cost effectively done by AI. So in GRC, you can look at third party risk and things like questionnaire automation, drafting policies, drafting control descriptions, drafting risk scenarios, mapping key controls and risks together. You can hire a junior compliance analyst to do a lot of that work. It might take weeks to map one framework to another, or you can have an AI that's trained in GRC concepts do that mapping in a matter of minutes. And so, we're seeing a lot of benefits there. We're seeing a lot of benefits in our sort of in our talent pool, right? Like I think a lot of analysts don't want to be doing that low level work. They want to be doing more strategic work. And so there's been tremendous benefits there. I think the thing I'm most excited about in the GRC space is using AI in control testing. So looking at sort of the relevance and quality of evidence and being able to evaluate that evidence in a more automated way and be able to do that at scale. In GRC, you're always having to make trade-offs around testing frequency, testing depth. And with AI, you don't have to make those trade-offs, right? You can test a lot more, a lot frequently because you're not limited by the human factor there. And then, the focus really comes to quality control, right? Having somebody trained in GRC, overseeing those agents, assessing quality, tuning, making sure that you can stand behind the decisions that they make. But again, we're seeing huge ROI and productivity gains across all those areas in GRC and security operations.
That's pretty exciting. I want to leave you with a kind of one last question, which is more about kind of the CISO function, team, talent, skills, etc. How you see that evolving, and Richard, if this is one of the conundrums right now, right, where the AI is going to automate a lot of the tedious work, the grunt work, etc., but the next generation, if they don't go through some of that learning, can they be the people overseeing this stuff, right? You just talked about how that's going to work, but we can oversee that work because we went through it. We learned the ropes, so to speak, right? How do you see that working in the CISO function for the next generation?
Yeah, well, I think the transformation will be difficult. I think it will be difficult for security teams and for the organizations they serve. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And so change management, change resilience really is the key function for the CISO role. There are a lot of really important legacy functions that the security team performs that have to survive the transformation, right? We can't use AI, we can't integrate AI into systems or business processes and ignore things like data governance, access control, third-party risk, login monitoring. All of those things have to survive the transformation. And so I think it's being thoughtful about how we incorporate those foundational security concepts in the new paradigm, being really an architect, not just technical, but also business sort of architect to figure out how do we persist those really important concepts as the business changes and begins to rely on AI. And that really is a strategic role, right? It's less technical. It's a creative role. It's trying to figure out how we do things differently and achieve, similar results post transformation. And then I think the biggest piece of advice I would give CISOs is that that's really hard on people. like people part of that problem is really tough. I'm seeing a lot of anxiety in the teams that I manage around, um, you know, think about somebody who's worried about who moved my cheese. Well, we're going to move everything. We're going to change everything. And so, helping your team manage through those changes, addressing the fear and anxiety, I think is a really important role that CISOs need to play. And I would just advocate for relentless optimism and growth mindset. Right, it's a new skill. You're learning, you're developing, you're stretching, and it's going to be good for the business. It's going to be good for the security industry if you can kind of keep up that relentless optimism and growth mindset, and then just encourage your teams that, whoever is the most resilient to change will win at the end of the day.
Look, I know many organizations are struggling with this change management. I do think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges in this AI era is that change management, the new way of doing things, the new mindsets, the new skills, and how do you get your talent to kind of move quickly as the technology and the organizational changes are happening. And I know how thoughtful you are about that change management. So, hey, look, I really enjoyed our chat. I always do when we connect and I have the opportunity to chat. Love picking your brain today and look forward to continuing this conversation in future sessions. So thank you again for joining today and really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a very exciting time to be in this space, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too, Guru.